today, the federal government, the big news they wanted us to talk about tonight is that they have decided to, well, make some changes to the Sexual Discrimination Act, to the Sexual Harassment Act. It, of course, did not impress the lefties who have demanded changes to the Sexual Discrimination Act. Remember, this was what the whole Women's March in part was about, the 55 recommendations from that report. They're going to do all 55, yet still a missed opportunity, because it's not about any of the things that they've been addressing. However, I think the Australian Financial Review, ironically, actually gets the headline of the day here. This is almost NT News stuff, and I say that as a compliment to both. Overhaul to make it easier to fire workplace sex pests. I'm loving that Matty Williams and the team at the NT News are apparently subbing what's going on with the Financial Review. So, the Prime Minister explained today why they have decided to sign up to what a large part of that Women's March was for, which was for all 55 recommendations of a report need to take place, and wait till I tell you what some of these are.
There is no doubt that the events of recent months has, as I said, reinforced the significance and highlighted it once again, and the frustration that I think that is felt. But I think the response itself is reflective of our principles as a government and our values as a government, which I would argue is enduring.
Michaelia Cash is the Attorney-General and Workplace Minister who will have to put all of this in place and through the Parliament.
We will amend the definition of serious misconduct in the Fair Work regulations to include sexual harassment. We will also clarify that sexual harassment can be a ground or a valid reason for dismissal. We're also going to amend the Human Rights Act so that the President's discretion to terminate a complaint under the Act is extended. Currently it's 6 months. As you know, victims don't necessarily come forward in that 6-month period. We're going to extend that out to 24 months to enable them and give them the time they may need to come forward. But what we're also going to do is clarify the scope of the Sex Discrimination Act, that it extends to judges and members of Parliament.
Now, I love that most of the media wrote about MPs and I don't care about the impacts, because it's actually the impacts on every workplace in the country. That's the decision that's been made here. Now, for those that are half listening, for those that are ready to go and dob about the evil man from Sky News Primetime, we all know that sexual harassment is not acceptable. We all know that any form of bullying of a colleague is not acceptable. We all know that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with by HR, and we all know that decent people would not do this to colleagues. The thing that's interesting about this is, as we have so often talked about in the past, when you get activist groups to help write the rules of a government, what ends up happening is that the definition of something is broadened and lowered. Now, we know what sexual assault is, we know what sexual harassment is, but then there is a grey area that has been used to justify a lot of things on the edges of our society as being not okay, sackable offences that are things like sexual misconduct. I repeat, for those that are half listening, decent people know how to interact with each other. Jerks deserve what's coming to them. But this is what is changing because they gave in and did every one of the 55. Not some, but every one of the 55. You've got 6 months currently to make a complaint if something has happened to you at work. No, now that's 2 years. Think about this in practical terms, not for the super serious, but for the not so super serious. Will you remember something 18 months ago? Will the relationship between people change from what it was 12 months ago when either you were mates or more friendly or openly playful, and then for whatever reason it ends up being a mateship gone sour or anything else? I'm just putting this out there. As you heard as well. Now, and I want to thank James Morrow and the team at the Daily Telegraph. We're lifting their version of old new rules. Old rules, sexual harassment was not explicitly fireable. You could not be fired for sexual harassment alone. Well, now, how's this? Sexual harassment will be something that you can be fired for serious misconduct. And here's the kicker, kids. You can be sacked for just being accused. Now, we have spent how long talking about the rule of law? you can be sacked under this system for being accused of something as far as 2 years ago. Again, no one is looking for clever little ways for people to still getting around having bum pats at work, but the idea that you can be sacked for something that it has not been proven you did is a big change. And that's why I say I don't care about the MPs and the judges, because it's going to affect every single workplace in the country. Now this bit. They're going to change gendered language. Gendered language like men and women, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. That was allowed in a workplace, but now, because all 55 must be approved, because that's what was demanded, now no gendered language. Here is Michaelia Cash explaining why that needed to change.
In relation to looking at what we say, which we would just say naturally, but not understanding what the impact is. And I think the one that really resonates with me, because it is something now I hear, as you have, Prime Minister, given back to me, don't chuck like a girl. That was one of the ones where, growing up, people may have said that, but we now know it has connotations.
So, to the nub and the heart of this. The group who has now been put at the very heart of the workplace system, the ones that are going to broaden the definition and lower the bar, where you can be sacked for something you were accused of, not proven of doing, is a group called Our Watch. Now, Our Watch, if you remember, is an organisation that at one point was led by David Morrison. David Morrison, remember, of course, was the Australian of the Year, and he believed that we should stop saying things like guys at work. This is now at the heart of a Liberal national government's attitudes towards the way men and women can interact at work. Now, this logic that words, despite what you have the intention, have other meanings, is something that David Morrison, of course, in part, was able to ride to being Australian of the Year, was able to ride and weaponise through things like Our Watch, which is mentioned more than a dozen times in the 55 recommendations that have now been adopted by the government. He also did some work for the Diversity Council, where they put out this highly patronising video because apparently we're all toddlers.
Research has told us for years how language cuts people out or cuts them down.
The global career mapping project that we're working on is actually looking at how we...
Come on, girls. Let's get cracking.
Girls?
And yet it still happens.
I know I get called feisty and bossy behind my back. Oh, and ball breaker too. But you wouldn't say that about a bloke, would you?
Now, Our Watch, go onto their website, well, they produce lovely little manuals that help tell us what the real problem is about Australia. Here's one of them, Men in Focus, Unpacking Masculinities and Engaging Men in the Prevention of Violence Against Women. This is at the heart of the system that has been signed off by this government because this report, the Respect at Work report, made that recommendation. It was because that human rights report was demanded to be put in place by, among others, those that marched on the Parliament a month ago. So you would think that those who marched on Parliament, those who are high profile in the media or put that march together would go, hallelujah, we got it. We got what we wanted. Yet the reaction on Twitter today to all of this change, well, tumbleweeds.